I'm Mike Linton, CEO of Valcom.
And I'm Josh Linton, the CIO of Valcom.
So Jason Mitchell, the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Delinea. And what does that mean? Can you tell us? Like, I have it written here, charter research, product development, SaaS operations, but tell us what that really means.
How long have you been in this role? How would you explain to our IT directors and to their executives, kind of blending those two? What is it that Delinea does?
So we're in cybersecurity. So that means there are thousands of security companies. Very specifically, we're at identity security. So, and more specifically than that, because Okta is an identity security, Entra ID. So we're not authentication, but for privileged access. So the people inside of their organization, the people or the machines, or the services that need privileged access. So this is a permission to a highly sensitive database server, Kubernetes, node. If there's sensitive, highly privileged access needed, we provide a solution that helps you manage that. Make sure that they don't have too many permissions. Make sure that they really should be using that, and they shouldn't be. A lot of times, IT admins will be giving, in smaller companies or less mature, the IT admin will just be given domain credentials. That is a very unsafe practice. But it becomes really hard to manage. Oh, you mean I need to create a unique credential for every server? If that's super secure, that would be a nightmare to manage manually. We provide solutions that will help you do that at scale.
How would you explain that in one sentence to an executive? Like, hey, this is what we do.
The easiest way I do it in the elevator when I'm talking to someone is, hey, you probably know what a password manager is on your phone. And you probably instinctively right now are creating a different credential for every website so that we do that for enterprise IT. We are a bolting solution, a password manager for enterprise IT.
Protecting all access to the most critical data most critical systems.
Yeah, through techniques of really, and there are a lot of security companies that will say we help with critical infrastructure. Specifically, we focus on the credentials. Making sure, because credentials are going to get stolen through phishing scams or whatever. Credentials will be stolen. It's not if it happens, it's when. We make sure that the attackers can't abuse that. Can't start going onto different servers and doing things like that's what we try to protect.
Have you seen that happen? Any examples, real world examples of, you talk about, hey, people are getting phished, all of that. Any examples that could really resonate that you could share?
2 years ago, maybe a year ago, one of the big ones was Disney. Disney's Slack was exposed. An attacker found a script with their credential, and the credential was a global reader of every channel in Slack. And so an attacker who stole someone's identity was able to start moving around on servers and running little searches through files. Hey, are there any passwords? Hey, I found a password in the script. And this password happened to be global reader of Slack. So they downloaded, terabytes of Slack data from a Disney's. That's a very well-known attack, and that was overprivileged. That user who stole that identity of that IT admin should not have been navigating around servers.
How would Delinea kind of have solved that or not allowed that to happen, I assume?
So when that attacker, and a lot of times they call the help desk, then they get a username and password, a username, because they can kind of guess, oh, your first name and last name is this. Okay, first name dot last name at your domain. They start to kind of guess what your username is. And then they start to MFA bomb. And eventually that user kind of clicks, I'm tired of this. I don't know who's asking me. Let me just click yes. So now they get an identity. That's one way they can get it. They get an identity. So now they've got access into an identity. Now they just start navigating around servers. They use scripts and we would have stopped that because that credential would have only had access to the one server that they were on. It would have not been the same credential to get to other servers. Once our solution is fully up and running, every server in the environment has a unique credential. So you might get one, but all you can do is get on that one server. You're not now surfing all of the servers in the environment. That's how we were stopped.
So as a user, I would have a different credential for a different server.
One for every single server. And not only that, after you use it, let's say you get onto it for 5 minutes to do something, when you log off, we would have rotated the password. Even if an attacker had a credential, it would have been invalid just the minute that IT admin gets off the server.
And maybe an obvious question, but as a user in my head, I'm thinking that's a nightmare to manage all of those passwords. I'm assuming that Delinea does some things to make that manageable. Tell me a little bit about how would I need to get on the server. I get on, I use my password, I get off, I need to get back on. What does that look like from an end user's perspective?
Yeah, they log into a portal, either a desktop app or website. They just select their server. Either they know the name of the server or they see it in a folder structure. They just click on it and say RDP, SSH. And we just open up a tab. If you're on the desktop, we open up a tab where they can use PuTTY, but they never see the password. They just see the list of servers. I want to get on that Linux node. Click it. It opens up, logs them in. They actually never even know. They don't even know the password.
And so this is really a tool for the kind of the IT department. Your end users are not using this. Is not an end user kind of tool set, right?
These are it's not even everyone in IT. It's like your system administrators, those folks. It's a tool for them that, they're every day, or sometimes vendors and contractors need to get onto a server to change a file, deploy a new version. You just want to make sure that whoever needs to do that on a daily basis, we do it in a very safe, restricted way. And when you're done, you're out. And not only that, when you do get in there, we're recording it. So we're recording everything they're doing. And then we can get into later, but we use AI to kind of like go and review everything they did and make sure it was safe. And, were they doing anything they shouldn't have been doing, that kind of thing. So we have tools that help with that. But that's essentially, how we restrict that.
Does everybody, the system admins, do they know this is a problem, or are you finding yourself educating them on this is a problem, or just, hey, this is a solution and they already know they need that? What's the landscape there?
Like the cybersecurity team, like they get it and they know what they're trying to do. Like the CISO definitely knows this. I mean, all you have to say is privileged access management or PAM. The CISO is like, yeah, at some size, every company is like, I need a PAM solution. Like, I need Okta, Entra, I need PAM. But the day-to-day user, they just need to get onto the servers. And so whether I click on this portal or I open up PuTTY or I go to, you tell me what tool you're using, fine. As long as it's easy for me, a lot of times they don't even know where it is.
So I've heard people say that identity is the new perimeter. What does that mean? And how are you all thinking about that?
Yeah, we say it for sure. And we're biased, of course. But we do believe it. And what that means is that with cloud and remote work and SaaS services, you really can't just rely on the firewall and the network to be your perimeter. And a lot of people, 10 years ago, and a lot still today, a ton, sort of build their security strategy around network access. And so, starts with a firewall, but then only this user can get to these servers, but they can't get, from this server because you created a subnet, or maybe only these ports. And so your whole security strategy is ports and network and access through the network. But with SaaS service, for an end company, I have some, a bunch of servers over there for those applications. But I'm also using Salesforce, also using Office 365. How's my firewall going to protect me there? So a network-based approach is maybe not enough, or for us, we would say that's kind of antiquated. I actually need to think it's the user, what services they need, whether it's on my network or it's in the cloud. I'm thinking about your identity and what permissions you have and what services, and ideally just in time. So you're not in any admin roles of any services. You log in and I need to get onto Salesforce. Great. Let me add you into your roles. You're now logged in. You're done. I'm moving you out. That's removing your standing permissions, like doing everything real time. That is like nirvana.
Now, have you seen the new Superman movie?
No,
When you watch that, I saw about 10 security implications. Josh, have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh
either.
my goodness. I can't vouch for the whole movie, although I did like it, but not everyone did. I just thought cybersecurity, and it was an identity problem. Anyway,
That's
you
interesting.
can have a force field or you can have all of these perimeters, but if someone can hack your identity, you are dead.
You're in trouble.
And that's what happened. That's when his dog got sold.
Hey, whoa, Mike.
Yeah, we'll
Spoiler
have to
alert?
say spoiler. I don't know. Everyone
Okay.
should have watched it by now. So Jason, I'm sorry to bring that up.
I had a quick question, Jason. You mentioned, sorry, we're getting back to serious business here. I don't know what just happened, but you kind of mentioned cloud. Tell me a little bit about how you guys integrate. I assume you work with cloud deployments, and whether we're on-prem servers or remote or cloud, the different cloud platforms. Maybe tell us a little bit about how Delinea handles that, but then also we kind of want to move into AI. What are you guys doing for AI and cloud?
well, I'll hit the first one, cloud. So you're right. A lot of customers, and most customers are not. They don't just have their own data centers. They've got cloud service providers, and they're most of the time using multiple. I've got a little bit of Azure, and I've got a little bit of AWS, and I've got a data center. That's most customers. And so our solutions can handle any of those combinations. You're all data centers, your own data centers, great. You have solutions there. If you've got half your infrastructure in the cloud and half of it's on your data center, ours works. If you're 100%, I'm only in Azure and GCP, our solutions can still work. So whether you're spinning up VMs or you're spinning up Kubernetes clusters, we still have techniques and solutions that will limit the privilege, give you access safely, and prevent lateral movement. So that's that part. The other part is AI. That one's really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, lots of IT departments are developing and building, AI services using, whether it's you're using a public platform like an AI, or whether you're just hosting your own model, for two reasons why that's a little bit scary for IT. Number one, privacy. They don't really have visibility into what data are you passing to that LLM, and are we sending them unsafe data? How are we tracking that? Are we sending customer information? Sending proprietary information we really don't want out. If you don't know, where these LLMs are being used or how they're being consumed, you probably don't have visibility of what data you're passing. That's one thing that scares IT or leaders, business leaders. The other one, a little more technical, is agentic AI, which is large language models making the decision about which APIs to call. Now in the case of like a script or a program, you kind of know like exactly what calls it's going to make. So it's a little bit easier to manage. Okay, I just need them to have these three rights, these three permissions. In agentic AI, the LLM's deciding. But now it's more like you're giving them access to all of this and you don't know which one they're calling. So what's called overprivilege, this admin just needs to be able to do these three actions, but I've given them access. I'm making them full admin, so they actually have 100 permissions. That's called overprivilege. Agentic AI really can exploit almost more than a human the overprivilege, and that's a little bit scary for CISOs.
How does an IT leader explain this to the executive? So the executive's like, oh, we need that. Like, we understand. How have you seen that?
The privacy part, they quite get. Business leaders seem to be into, maybe it's all like the celebrity vulnerabilities that happen, like, oh, my data is out, so they're sort of aware that, okay, I get it. People inside my organization, finance people, they're opening up a browser, they go into ChatGPT and uploading financial, spreadsheets to look at analysis. Okay, I get that. My proprietary data is leaving our boundaries. That's more intuitive for them. The harder one is the second part that I mentioned, which is the developers, internal technical folks, creating scripts, using AI agents, using agentic AI, and maybe not knowing more the subtleties of why is that sort of risky. The CISO would get that. The CISO would then try to explain that to business like, hey, we have a increased risk exposure here. We need to, invest or spend to kind of control this or manage.
Yeah, it just seems hard. I hear you talk about agentic AI and all of those things and how that is actually super risky for an organization. Just how I would understand that is very difficult, right? Or how an executive would understand, like, what's the real problem? Like, we're 10 times more efficient now. Do I really need to worry about what Jason and Josh just said? They're like, so I'm just trying to figure, how do you really explain that? Like, it is difficult. It is way more risk. How would a CISO like explain that? I'm trying to figure out if that's the best
Well, and I
question.
think it's tough too. This is compared to some other more kind of user facing, right? When this impacts, this seems more challenging, I think, because something that impacts all of the users or every single person in the organization is a little bit easier to explain, right? I think this is a little bit more difficult in the sense that we're protecting something that from an executive's mind maybe should already be very protected because only my most trusted or only my most kind of critical employees when it comes to some of these servers and these things, it should only be my best employees when it comes to technology that should be accessing these anyway, right? And so to try to explain, and I don't know that I have the answer, but to try to explain that, hey, we still need to do a better job, or we need to eliminate to as much as we can, to the extent that we can, the potential loss of a credential, right? By creating these one-time kind of access controls, it becomes very difficult to be like, hey, we're protecting our most critical from the people who shouldn't get hacked, right? That's kind of the simple way. But, and I think that's where, as I think through it, it's this idea that says, if an end user gets compromised, the exposure could potentially be bad, but it may not be necessarily catastrophic. If a critical server or critical asset becomes compromised for whatever reason, again, you mentioned earlier, vendors or contractors having access, and there's been stories about that happening. That's when you can kind of have these catastrophic incidents. And that I think is where we're trying to protect, right? Protecting these critical workloads from catastrophic type of invasions, if you will, rather than your day-to-day. That's how I think about it. And it's a much harder story, I think, than simply we need to protect everybody from everything.
Totally agree. In general, anytime you want to talk to a business leader about security, you have to plot out two vectors. What is the impact if this does happen? That's what you were just hitting. And then the other vector on that is what is the likelihood of happening? There's a very low chance this happens, but it would be catastrophic. Okay, that's how I would talk about it here. And so you sort of plot out all your risks using those two vectors, and then you kind of say, okay, I want to spend up to here. I could spend on, it's like insurance. I could buy unlimited insurance and prevent anything from happening. We'd go out of business because we can't afford it. I need to spend some. And so that's how a CISO typically talks to the business. It's sort of like impact and likelihood. And let's decide if we want to spend.
I love that. I think that is a good framework for an executive to understand, both the CISO and the CEO of, because I like to talk through impact and likelihood, because I always come and say, well, the likelihood's really small, therefore we don't need to invest. But it's like, if the impact's huge and the investment's not huge, then we could solve that. We could close that risk and that gap. So I really like that. As you've seen IT directors interact with executives and the challenges they have communicating that impact, communicating how the likelihood, have any insight you would give an IT leader on how to do that, or how you've seen that done well?
You kind of have two people speaking different languages. And unfortunately, the onus is on the technical leader to translate into the language that the business leader speaks, which is typically like financial. Why we're going to spend this? What's the return? What's the cost if I don't? How much revenue might I lose? And so you could say, okay, the CEO, you need to become more technical. That's one way to solve it. Or you can say, the IT leader, listen, don't come to me with a technical solution. Present it in a financial or business oriented language. I would say that the onus is on the technical leader to translate what they're asking for, or what they need, or what they plan to do, or whatever project they're trying to communicate. They have to translate it and put it in the context that the business leader understands. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is, because the technical stuff is just jargon and language. And it's easier for the technical person to translate to the financial than the financial person to start to understand a bunch of acronyms and least privilege and just in time and all of that stuff. And so I would say it's okay for the IT leader to ask questions about ARR and return and IRR, understand some basic financial concepts and communicate in their terms. That when IT leaders can do that, I see them be really successful.
I think that's so insightful that unfortunately the onus is on the IT leader to speak the financial or the executive language, oftentimes financial. I also liked what you said as far as they can learn that and they need to ask these questions, because I just think about an IT executive and leader saying, hey, what's the impact if we lost our ERP down for 2 hours? Are they asking that question? Because as soon as the CFO says, that can't happen, that unlocks budget. that unlocks, well, right now we have this gap. I'm communicating that to you to protect me, to protect our organization. Therefore, the impact would be huge. It's 20% likelihood. Just happened here at Disney, and they spend $1 billion on their cybersecurity, but we might want to spend some money. Anyway, I really liked how you put that. That was instructive for me, that they can learn that. And I think our goal is to try to educate IT leaders on how to talk that language and how to ask that question. Any last insights that you have around what you would want to share with IT leaders before we exit, sound off?
Sometimes an IT leader will do they want to do a project. They want to deploy this new tool and they think this would, it's a little invest, and they'll model it out. I need 2 heads and I would put Johnny over here. And then they'll present it and then finance will go, I just don't think that's worth investing, right now. Don't get emotionally attached to this is just a business decision. We only have so much revenue and there's macroeconomics at play here. Put your projects together, present them. If be an executive, if there's time to be an IT leader and stand in your own chair and stand in your own title and do your job, and then there's a time to be an executive. When you're presenting to an executive, be an executive. Don't stand in your own seat. Stand in the seat of an executive of the business. And sometimes you need to hold the line and fight for it. Sometimes, hey, yes, I spent a lot of time. I would like to do it, but you know what? You're right. This is not what we should be spending, next year's 12% of next year's budget.
That's
That's
awesome.
great advice. Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate you joining us today, and we've got some great takeaways as we do this. And we just like to let our listeners know that if you want to learn more about Delinea, we'll have links and some information in the show notes. But again, thank you for joining us today, Jason. It's been a pleasure.